You ready? Okay. Who here has heard about the Iran-Contra affair? Okay, 1, 2. Some people have heard about it. Okay. So back in the 80s, Reagan was president, right? And we had a hostage crisis going on in Lebanon. I actually thought it was the older Iran hostage crisis, but there's another one in Lebanon where the Hezbollah was a terrorist organization that was actually abducting American and other citizens, and their biggest supporter was Iran, and that's important because Iran was at war with Iraq, and so what we ended up doing was we made an arms deal, well, a few arms deals with Iraq, a few arms deals with Iran, sorry, and they. So we made arms deals with them where we got a lot of money from that, and they also helped us get hostages back from the Hezbollah because of their connection to them, right? And so this is kind of sketchy because that's kind of like dealing with terrorists, or negotiating with terrorists, right? And you always hear the policy, we don't negotiate with terrorists, right? So that's kind of something we're not supposed to do. Something else that was happening at the same time in Nicaragua, the Sandinista government it's a communist regime that had recently come up, and the Contras were this rebel group that were trying to overthrow them, right? And so Reagan was like, I don't like communists, I want to support the Contras. And so what he actually encouraged in his administration, well, the administration ended up funding the Contras through outside means because at the same time, Congress had just passed some laws that made it illegal for us to fund them directly because they didn't want another Vietnam. Everyone hated Vietnam. Moving on, okay, where am I? So they got around that. They got around the laws by going to third parties like other countries and private sources to get funding. Okay, so here's where it becomes the Iran-Contra affair. Those sources were running dry, right? And so a guy named Oliver North, he was a member of the National Security Council and was kind of responsible for funding the Contras. And he actually got the Contras, he got money from the Iran-Contra affair, right? Or the Iran deals, and took that money to fund the Contras. Okay, so that was a crash course on that. A lot of information, I know, and I have a hard time following it. But moving on, my claim is that Reagan actually was told at some point about the diversion of money from the Iran deal to the Contras. And so I'm going to try and prove that. And so the first evidence for his knowledge of this is that there's strong evidence that he knew about both the independent things in and of themselves. And so this comes from the investigations that followed when the scandal finally broke, where they found that Reagan encouraged encouraged these policies for the Iran deal and the Contra stuff, and he was regularly briefed on these things, so he was definitely aware of those. And okay, and then the next thing is that kind of discredits him and goes to show that he knew about the arms, the diversion of money, was that he attempted to cover up the Iran deals. And the way he did this was he permitted the creation of false accounts of the Iran arms sales to be given to Congress and the American people that denied his own involvement in initial sales. And think about these false accounts. The information that they were false came too late to the investigation for it to be used well, and for it to be investigated and prosecuted effectively. So that was kind of a problem. But that showed that he's willing to lie in order to cover stuff up, or at least he's willing to cover stuff up, right? Next thing, Reagan showed that he knew Oliver North, remember the guy I talked about who was in charge of the diversion? He knew that North had access to outside funding. In a meeting, the official notes recorded Reagan saying, "What about the private groups who paid for ads for the Contras? Have they been contacted? Could they do more ads?" Right? So the official notes were had him saying something that was perfectly all right, but then the Alan Fears, who was in the CIA, testified that he said, "What about all these people? Can they help?" So he had knowledge that Oliver North had access to these undercover monies, and there's evidence that Reagan met with North regularly, and Poindexter attested to this, and so that's my evidence for that. And Poindexter was Reagan's national security advisor. Next was Reagan. There's evidence that Reagan actually authorized the diversion, and if he authorized it, obviously he knew about it. And so evidence for that, North testified against him saying that he did, but that wasn't really completely taken as the truth. But then there's other evidence, and actually have an artifact, even though we probably weren't going to have one. This is from unclassified documents, and it states the details of the diversion, and it has a recommendation to tell Reagan about it. And so, as I said before, Reagan met with North regularly, according to Poindexter, and North wanted Reagan to know about it. This was written by North, and so I'm sure North told him about it at some point. Last point, Reagan ended up getting Alzheimer's, so it's possible when he said that he didn't know about the diversion, and it's possible he was telling the truth, but was told about it originally at some point, because he'd forgotten about it due to Alzheimer's. So in conclusion, Reagan was aware of and supported the two individual things, and that was well proven. Second, he was willing to cover things up. Third, he knew of North's access to underground monies. I don't know if that's the right word, but anyways. He met with North often. North testified against him, saying what I'm trying to prove, that he knew about the diversion. And he was supposed to see this document. It's possible he didn't, but it indicates North wanted him to know something, and if North met with him, I'm sure he talked about it at some point. And he suffered from Alzheimer's, which means his testimony isn't rock solid. Okay, that's all I got. It helps me be less nervous. Is that a problem?
No, I'm just saying.
Oh yeah, that's how I handle it. Like I just imagine like I'm talking to a person. It was like really hard for me when I was like in my car like practicing the speech beforehand, and I was like going over the intro and trying to do this summary is going to take forever, and it kind of did take forever.
Zachary, I would really prefer not to have you stand there while I'm doing that, so if you could sit down, that would make me more comfortable at least. I'm sorry if it makes you uncomfortable to sit and listen. I think you recognize, I heard you just explaining to somebody, it's taking you too long to summarize at the beginning. You have to give a context for people who are unlikely to know a lot about it. You knew that a lot of the audience isn't going to be familiar with it. So that's one of those things you're going to have. We talked about it the other night when you came to speak to me about this. You got to get that story down a lot faster. It takes you 2 minutes and 49 seconds to set it up before you ever get to your proposition. So basically, you're halfway through the speech before you get to the part where you're explaining, here's what my argument is. Then when you get to that, you don't preview what the secondary claims are. You don't signpost those points in the body of the speech. You're making some claims here and there, but they're not very distinctive and they're not building together. The best part of your argument is at the end when you're summarizing what you were trying to say, and I could see a little bit more of the point about how these things fit together. But as you were presenting it, it felt a lot more random than it should have. It's not building the way it's supposed to. The evidence is extremely vague. You don't have direct quotes from Oliver North. You don't have direct quotes from the report that you make a reference to. I'm still not sure where this redacted data that you're talking about here came from. You need to tell us those sorts of things. You need to cite this information. I think you do make some big inferences about, for instance, a couple of pieces of material. The one place that there was something that was clearly cited was Alan Freer's statement that there was a conversation with the North about, can we get more money on this advertising thing for the Contras or the fundraising that's going on there. That was the one piece of information that was cited as a source and was pretty clear. Poindexter gets paraphrased at best. And I don't know the context in which that was even said. I think there's a lot of stuff here that is so ambiguous that it's hard to figure out how that proves the point that you're talking about, and it needs to be a lot clearer as a consequence. As I said before, I think if you went back to the end of your speech and you went to that last summary, if you stuck that at the beginning of the speech as a preview, and then signposted those points in the body of the speech more clearly, it would still go better. You still need to shorten that opening section, though. All right. Thank you.